Yeah, so there's actually handouts being passed out. I know it's kind of weird, but as you're going to see, we come from a ultra risk environment, ultra risk avoidance environment, and we weren't able to get much put into our presentation to get it approved. Actually, we had it initially. We had to strip it all out to get it approved. Anyway, they did allow us to put in these handouts. So again, I know it's kind of weird, but this next presentation is going to have a handout, and we'll get started here in maybe like 5 minutes. Hey, good afternoon, guys. So, first of all, thanks for coming out to listen to our talk. This is actually David and I's first time presenting, so if we're a little nervous or we're stumbling through this or whatever, maybe just have a little bit of patience with us. And afterwards, for sure, come and grab us and give us some feedback on things we can improve on for next talk. So, overview of our talk today. We've got a lot of material we're going to get through. Again, this is one of the reasons for the handouts. But we are super excited to share our journey building a red team at USAA. We're not going to be covering all of the ops that we've done, all the red team ops. We're just going to be hitting some highlights from each year, as you see. Mainly, we're just wanting to give you a sense, give you an idea or a sense of how we had to build the red team up slowly to build trust. A note for the note takers in the audience: the slides are scheduled to be tweeted here in about 45 minutes, so those will be available. Be on the lookout for those. So I'm Robert. If you didn't figure that out already, 14 years in InfoSec experience, about 7 years at NSA. I started and still lead the red team at USAA, and I'm presenting with David, who is one of my core red team members.
All right, well, before I get started, are there any current or former military in here? Cool. Thank you very much for your service. So hopefully you guys know what USAA is and what we do. As Robert mentioned, my name is David. I spent the first 6.5 years of my InfoSec career with the Air Force as a pen tester, and then also with NSA. I've had some really cool jobs prior to coming to USA, where I'm currently a red team member, but as of about 6 to 8 months ago, took over the new detections lead for the detections team. And you may think, why the heck is a red team member leading the new detections? Trust me, it kind of it was a little weird for me too, but it works really well for us, and we'll get a little bit more into that coming up. All right, so just wanted to get this off our chest. This is going to probably piss off some of you. We almost feel like the word purple teaming, not purple team, but purple teaming, is one of those buzzwords, right? It's one of those words that's made up, for funding or for whatever. It's kind of like next gen or machine learning. All right. But honestly, what we really think purple teaming is just red teaming done right. It's red teaming working with blue during an incident, throughout the op. It's using the latest TTPs and bypasses, and it's just doing things different. Because honestly, what good does it do your company, your defenders, your all the different people that use your tools or your products or your services? What good does it do them if the red team is just using the same TTPs, using the same tools, and more importantly, stonewalling the blue team? So, the problem. All right, so as Robert mentioned, we come from a company that is super risk avoidance. Risk is just something that our company did not want to play chicken with, and brand reputation and uptime, as I'm sure some of you guys have experienced, is more than a priority. If your company or your leadership at whatever level is like this, trust us, we understand. So, the big thing to understand from this slide is you need to crawl before you walk before you run before you drive, and then drive before you fly. So this is our journey of how we went from driving to flying, and how we gave proof of value that was over tenfold what we received from most of our third-party pen testers.
All right, so the early years. So in the beginning, there was nothing, right? No red team. The operating picture beginning in 2014 was all of our detections and mitigations were out-of-the-box, vendor-only detections and mitigations. And that goes for endpoint, email, web, the whole 9 yards. There were no modern custom detections to speak of whatsoever. To give you a sense of how bad it was, we would often miss our third-party no-notice quarterly pen test. We would just completely miss them. In fact, it was so bad that even after they revealed themselves, we had trouble tracing their steps throughout their attack. We had almost no insight. So again, it was horrible. So enter Hunt Ops, or hunting operations. So Hunt Ops was actually, I started it with 2 other people, and it's based on my career at NSA. So at NSA, I worked on the TAO side and the NTOC side. And for those that don't know, TAO's on the red side, the hackers, NTOC's the blue side, defenders. So Hunt Ops was based mainly on my career there at NTOC specifically. Hunt Ops started with 2 main purposes. First, and most common to the industry, right, would be looking for active and previous exploitation on the network. And second, and probably half the room's gonna disagree with us on this though, and that's fine. But the second reason for Hunt Ops, or second purpose, was gap hunting, looking for gaps. So looking for weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and attack vectors. And so just to be clear on that, we're not talking about CVE type vulnerabilities like you'd find with Nessus or OpenVAS scan, right? We're talking more like best practice vulnerabilities. So again, Red Team was created in response to this gap hunting portion of Hunt Ops. So on Red Team now, Red Team stood up, and Red Team's initial purpose, in addition to gap hunting, like we just talked about on the previous slide, was to trigger IREs, or incident response exercises. So like some of you in this audience, you may come from large environments, and like us, you may have very few real incidents per year. I mean, we only have a couple of infected workstations per year or whatever, so very few incidents. As such, our first responders or incident responders, they get very little training opportunity, if you will. They don't have much opportunity to keep their skills sharp. So IREs was a way to, and they are still a way currently today, present day, to keep incident responder skills sharp. The first few RTOs that we pulled off though, or Red Team operations, they were so script kiddie-ish that we literally called them injects. Just to give you an example of one, it was like 5 lines of Python code that simulated exfil. I mean, super script kiddie-ish. All right, so the early years. The biggest thing here is trust. In the beginning, we had no trust with management or leadership. Just to give you an example, we wanted to launch a port scan at one of the first RTOs against the server, and it took us weeks to get that approved because they were so concerned we were going to take the server down, right? There's very little, yeah, you've heard that too.
You better tell the hackers not to do that.
Well, exactly. So baby steps is what I would say, right? And that's going to be the overall theme of this talk is we had to take baby steps. We had to do a little bit of time, gain trust, and build up that trust. And that's a tip I would leave for anyone here that's in the process of starting a Red Team or thinking about building a Red Team, is you're probably not going to be able to start full-blown Red Team operations overnight. You're going to have to start off super simple, script kiddie-ish like you're going to see here in the beginning, and kind of build trust and work your way up. Okay, so handout again, I think we've caught everyone, and most of you have heard this like 5 times now, but this talk is going to have a handout. So if you don't have one, grab one in the middle of the tables here, in the middle of each row. All right, so one of our ops, again, we're only going to hit some highlights, but just to give you an idea, one of our ops was employee account lockout. So with this one, we harvested usernames from open source Intel and even our .com presence, right? We harvested those usernames and then turned around and hit external services with them. So like our Skype service, for example. And we used random passwords. It wasn't like a brute force attempt or anything like that. We weren't trying to guess the passwords. It was literally just on a lockout attempt, so a denial of service attack, right? What we had found was that even though we had MFA, even all the way back then, MFA, if it's not implemented correctly, doesn't actually prevent this attack. So if MFA is not checked, or if the MFA token is not checked and verified before that password is sent to AD, that counts as a failed login attempt. And if you have a threshold of 5 failed logins locks out an account, an attacker can lock out all of your employees' accounts in spite of the fact that you have an MFA and do it from external. If you look at your handout, number 1 and number 2 actually has a little more detail on that. It's got tips, as you're going to see, all these have tips for red side and blue side, so for both audiences. Biggest takeaway for this particular one though, especially for blue side, is MFA. Again, MFA does not prevent account lockout, just remember that. Make sure that that password isn't hitting AD before that token is checked. Okay, give you an idea, our second op that we'll talk about, scanning internal network. Looking for lateral movement opportunities, right? Pretty basic. You're gonna see the first handful of these are pretty basic. If you check out number 3 in your handout, there's some more detail on that. The biggest takeaway that I would point you to is the basics. Don't assume, and again, this goes for red team and blue team, don't assume that the basics are covered, right? Don't assume that you can detect a brute force attack or a port scan or some of these basic things that's been happening for 20, 30 years. You may be surprised at how many gaps you find in just the basics. With several of our ops, and this is a recurring theme over the last 4 years of red teaming, is we needed quick and dirty ways to build stealthy malware. So again, we come from a large environment and we probably have, I don't know, half a dozen security and AV products that scan things like web downloads and email attachments before they ever get to our users. So we had to find, and still to this day, have to find quick and dirty ways to avoid all AV detection, right? In 2014, what we found ourselves building a lot of was script-based malware and jar-based malware. Because what we realized was that AV engines back then, none of them were checking non-PE-based malware. And even to this day, I would say that 90% of AV engines completely ignore anything that's not PE-based. So check out number 4 in your handout. We have a little more detail on that for you. The bottom line for blue team that I leave with you is this is one you're going to have to do your hard work on, right? Especially for script-based malware. Specifically things like interpreters, Python, PowerShell, Perl, etc., that are running on your boxes. You're going to need a baseline normal activity. So the scenario that we throw around at work a lot is we want to know when a non-IT person is running a PowerShell script, for example, right? Because that's very odd. And the only way you're going to be able to get their blue team is you're going to have to, over a period of 3 or 6 months, or in some cases, we work 10 months on these detections, baselining normal activity, finding all of the developers and all of the internal scripts, getting those whitelisted before that detection ever goes production, or before it ever goes prod. Adam mentioned application whitelisting in the previous slide. In an environment like ours, that's probably not going to happen in my lifetime, right? We have a huge environment with lots of legacy applications. It just probably will never happen. Our best bet is building detections. All right, so here we are. We're wrapping up 2014 end of year review. By the end of 2014, we're getting close to what we call just like the bad guy operations. So from external, phishing, get a rat on the box, pivot, etc., right? We're getting close to that. We're not there yet. We're still kind of script kiddie-ish. Management still has concerns, though, about us going full-blown operations. Again, because of availability concerns. Give you a sense of how much time the members were investing in red versus blue. We were red about 20% of the time back then, and of course blue 80%. But we're looking forward to the future, though, and the promise of being able to move to real full-blown operations.
All right, so let's talk about 2015. We've labeled this one 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Any Paula Abdul fans in here? All right, so this was the year that I came on board to USA. Prior to this, I'd always been threat emulation or pen testing. On the government side, mostly space, aircraft, other weapon systems. First time really doing it in the commercial world. What I noticed quickly was, all right, the RTO wasn't geared towards, what can we do for the security of the company or the products, the processes, any of that kind of stuff. It was, what can we do for our first responders to give them that exercise. It was a bit of a rough time, but again, I didn't really know any better. All right, so even though we were really restricted back in 2015, there was still some good that came from it. These were parts that were either, a full op or just part of it. The first one, Macrodocs. Again, even though we had to fake it quite a bit, one thing we were finally able to start doing was throwing in, malicious documents and such to test that email security flow. Prior to this, all of our initial footholds had to be simulated. There was a lot of fear of, well, what happens if this makes it out? Are we giving malicious code to the bad guys? Is it going to mess up our reputation? Any of that kind of fun stuff. This was also the first time that we started to target our email security stack specifically. So targeting the sandboxes, and I think it's number 4. You definitely want to read that post about our primary internal email security vendor, and a lot of the good work that we did with them and how they got that stuff fixed. But on the blue side, this really allowed us to start looking at emails from the whole flow, from cradle to grave, from the time that it made it in, what other servers did it hit, what other security appliances did it hit. It also allowed us we also started building scripts on the Exchange servers that allowed us to search and destroy for malicious emails. And then on top of all of that, building in that integration with our threat intel providers. Are we getting hit with something that is known bad or known APT? So that's when we started getting on that side. Data exfil. All right, so this was a cool one because we wanted to see how our protections and detections were for everything from a mass exfil all the way down to a trickle. And then on top of all of that, going over multiple protocols, DNS, 80, 443, mail, etc. On the blue side, we noticed DLP only caught like the really obvious and specific stuff. So because of this, we needed to look at the exfil problem from a different perspective. We started building alerts based off of bytes out, long streams, looking at the different protocols, and then also we started a more robust blocking of data that didn't conform to protocol standards. Internal phishing was pretty cool because we had gained access from external on a box, but because of that user's location in the network, we were very restrained and restricted. So we couldn't do any lateral movement because of the segregation and other protections. So we came up with the idea, well, what if we use similar malware and a similar macro, and then we send that to the target systems and target users to get on the target systems through an internal phish. And then this one worked really, really well. The reason it worked so well was the team that was monitoring our phish reports and whatnot, he was getting bombarded with tons of these internal benign phishing reports, and he had just created a recipe to auto-close it. So all of our phishes were going in, half of them getting reported, and they were just auto-closed and, never worked. All right, so on the blue side, what this really allowed us to do was completely rework the way that we do our reported phishing. It allows us to build cases based off of the user's access, and then the victims or the potential victims' access and their roles. It allowed us to also start looking at transport logs more in depth. And on top of that, looking at transport logs from internal and external, which really allowed us to start discovering more fake emails. Folks that went to a security con and then started with Telnet and like, oh, look what I'm doing. So it allowed us to find that stuff. All right, so even though I gave 3 good examples of the awesomeness that we did in 2015, there was still a lot of fake, a lot more than we really wanted to. There was a lot of emulating of certain steps, and we had to walk on eggshells a lot with regards to management and what we could and couldn't spoof. But have no fear, 2016 was bound to be an incredible year.
All right, 2016, so going legit. So we're 2 years into red team operations now, and we finally get to full-blown, just like the bad guy operations. Again, just like the bad guy, phishing from external, rat, pivot, right? So we're starting to partake of the fruit of our labor now after 2 years. Keep in mind, guys, management can really make or break things, right? So David was kind of nice, and I'll go ahead and say it because I'm the butthole, right? But our first manager, the first year was really awesome. So we were building up some really cool stuff. The manager, the second year that we were put under, not so great, right? The third year, we're back under a good manager, and things really start to take off. So management can make or break things. Another game changer for us, I guess I should advance the slide. Another game changer for us was one of the red team members had this idea to get a pre-approval letter drafted. This pre-approval letter would restrict us and put us within bounds like we're not going to affect more than 10 employees on a red team op, or we're going to use encryption at every layer. We're going to minimize exfil just to prove the point. We're going to have weekly oversight meetings with one of our tech fellows. So before, what we were doing is we would have to get permission from 10 to maybe a dozen different people for every op, like members of IT and leadership and management. But with this permissions memo, though, what it allowed us to do is go forward and not ever have to ask permission again, as long as we stayed within those bounds. And we could still go outside those bounds, but that's when we would have to go to that tech fellow, get special permission, sometimes get special permission from members of IT or leadership. But it really sped things up a lot. So I highly recommend red teams doing this. So again, 2016, we are now doing things just like the bad guy. Yep, so red team's purpose. So red team's purpose becomes more focused in 2016 as well. We're no longer just an extension of Blue or Hunt Ops. Yeah, that's the main thing. We're not an extension of Blue anymore, right? We're actually a separate red team. Also, another thing that we started doing differently is when we started planning an RTO, we would all go around the room and each member would answer the question, what detection or mitigation gap keeps you up at night? That's how we would start the RTO meeting, right? And the answer to that question from all of us, that would lead into what we would be doing for the next RTO. So basically, Blue Team was driving the red team ops. Another thing we started doing differently in 2016, we stopped pretending it wasn't red team during IREs or incident response exercises. So, before the first 2 years, we would avoid answering the question or say, it doesn't matter if it's us or not, you just need to work it like it's real kind of thing. Or sometimes we wouldn't even be in the office, we wouldn't even be available, right? But in 2016, we started right from the get-go when incidents cleared, we said, yes, this is a red team exercise. What this allowed us to do is make things safer, right? So it allowed us to deconflict our activity from potentially real activity that was going on the same day during the IRE. And we definitely had a few close calls here. Another benefit, and I think probably the biggest benefit, is it also allowed red team members to sit and side saddle with blue team members. So during IREs, even to this day, red team members will literally and physically go sit with blue team members during the IRE and give tips and hints and on-the-job training live, during the IRE. So enormous training value provided there. All right, so like the previous years, we'll talk about a few of the highlights from 2016 in terms of our ops. One of our ops, we targeted customer-facing employees. So in this one, what we did, we created fake member accounts. Again, we're at USAA Bank, so we just created fake member accounts, right? We use those member accounts to upload malware to our CSRs, our customer service reps. If you look at number 8 on your handout, you'll see a little more detail on that. And again, we're kind of flying through all the details here, but that's one of the reasons we have the handout for you guys. Just kind of high-level overview, though. What was happening is we were not thoroughly inspecting documents uploaded through member portals. So we were doing a great job on email attachments coming in and web downloads, but it was oversight on our part, not inspecting those member documents good enough. So this is a tip I would leave with Blue Team for sure. Again, there's tips for red and blue on this one in your handout, but the tip for Blue Team on this one is make sure any avenue to get documents into your environment goes through a thorough security stack. Don't forget about something. In our case, and one thing that Blue Team should also consider doing is for like member documents being submitted, like for example, like a Microsoft Word document that a member's uploading, take that and convert it and flatten it to like an image file so that your CSR only sees an image of the file that the member uploaded. And of course, what this does, this removes any chance of any active code being in a document. Targeting physical control systems. So again, not a lot of detail I'm going to be able to share on this one because of the sensitivity on it, but just remember this: your physical control system that operates your doors and perimeter security at your building or buildings, that's probably tied in. That's almost certainly tied into your corporate network. Not only is it tied into your corporate network, but it's probably like Windows or Linux based. So traditional techniques that you use to take over a workstation or a server can almost certainly take over your physical control systems as well. And so what we did in this op is we found a remote exploit in our physical control system. Without our badges on, we started out at the street. Again, no badges on. We exploited the physical control system from remote, and we buzzed ourselves in through the gates, through the turnstiles, all the way into both our data centers using this remote exploit. In my opinion, this was one of the funner ops. I know David has his, he has another op that he thinks is his best. This was my favorite though. We called this one Hollywood. We had a hidden camera on us when we were doing this. It's just like, seriously, it could be like a Mission Impossible or something, right? It was just an amazing op in my mind. One more op we'll cover, polymorphic worm. So we were able to release a self-propagating polymorphic worm in our environment. This one, real sensitive. I can't share a whole lot of detail. What I can share is that we compromised the service account, kind of like Adam was mentioning earlier, right? Service account passwords stay around forever. So we compromised the service account that had local admin privileges across the environment. We used that to schedule remote tasks on remote machines on a few dozen users, right? And that remote task, when it started up, actually impersonated the user it was infecting, so it was running under that user's account. And then those processes, when they spun remote workstations, and that kept propagating like that. So every time it propagated, it was different usernames. It was also morphing every time it jumped, so it had a different checksum every time it jumped, so it was hard for Blue Team to detect or mitigate. Yeah, so anyway, the biggest thing on this one, for us, it really proved how much Red Team was trusted at this point. I mean, think about it. If you're given the permission to release a self-propagating polymorphic worm that's almost unstoppable in your environment, you know your leadership trusts you at this point, right? All right, 2016, let's wrap that up. So again, Red Team had earned a ton of trust by the end of 2016. Also, we were now operating at about 1/3 of the time as Red Team, and again, 2/3 of the time as Blue Team. During Blue Team times though, Red Team members, specifically David and I, we were creating hundreds of detections just in 2016 alone. Because of that work that we were doing, our detections were growing extremely strong.
All right, so we labeled this one "Shot Ourselves in the Foot," and the biggest reason for it is as we were getting access or using different bypasses or whatever, after the op was over, we would take our Red Team hat off, put on our Blue Team hat, and then start building out those detections. And it sucked. From a Red Team perspective, it really sucked. All of our, with the exception of one op, all of our rats have been custom built by us, and all the malware, the keyloggers, all that kind of stuff has been us writing it. So it sucks when you burn it. So as you see, all right, cool. So as you see in the slide, Robert and I, we were killing it with a little over 94% of all the custom detections that we had built. These stem from network, from email, from web, all the way down to endpoint and some user-based. Because of this, we really needed to step up our game. We needed to find new and exciting ways that we hadn't used in any of the other Red Team ops, or any of the hunting ops that we had done, on the side. Thanks again to SubT and a few of the other guys that hooked us up with some cool ideas. All right. So as mentioned before, this was a cool year because we really had to keep innovating. For the first one, extreme caution on workstations, we were having such a hard time gaining that initial foothold without popping any alerts that we needed to find a new way to get our malware to run. we were trying all sorts of different things, and then we came up with the idea of, well, what happens in the VBA? Again, we're using macros versus a lot of the other stuff that we had used in previous, but in the macro, what if we rename PowerShell.exe to flower.gif? Well, flower.gif in VBA runs as an executable. So during this op, we were running 3 totally different phishing campaigns, and for mine, I had flower.gif and spurs.gif. We're from San Antonio, so if you have anything on the macro doc, or on the actual document related to Spurs or free tickets, you're almost guaranteed. So we were running PowerShell as Spurs or flower.gif, which made it super awesome for our incident responders when they're trying to get a triage package or whatever of that box, and they're seeing Spurs.gif communicating to Azure or AWS. I'm like, what the hell is this? So as a result of all of that, we needed to create a whole new suite of detections. Like our primary endpoint detections, we now needed a way, all right, so how do we prevent people from doing the same thing? So we have what we call our not detections. So not PowerShell, not CScript, WScript, not CMD.exe, any of those. And it takes a lot of overhead, but it has been incredible. We found a lot of commodity type malware just through that type of detection. The mission sheet, this was kind of fun because we found a way to remotely discover if our primary EDR tool was running on what we wanted for our next hop, for lateral movement or for vertical movement. And this allowed us to be way more selective and stay under the radar throughout the op. On the blue side, this highlighted that our patching hadn't been as promising or as good as we had hoped. All the code that we had built for that enumeration and for that bug, we released it back to Blue Team so they could automate that and make sure that the right executables and DLLs and stuff were pushed. It also allowed us to work with the vendor to fix the bug. Another key initiative was to start building up other remote detection tools like Tasklist, even stuff as basic as shutdown for a remote host. Blue was red. So we had attempted this one early in the year, trying to give our Blue Team members the opportunity to be red. We were going to do some coding for them and help them throughout the way, build up bruises and work the whole fish and all that, but give them the opportunity to really drive that. As most of us know, we are way overworked on the Blue Team side, so it started off super hot, but then fizzled after a couple of weeks because there was just too many other priorities. So we did this again with our summer interns when they came in, and they found a really cool vulnerability on our primary MFA tool. It was talked about during the how to break the MFA, at least that type of MFA. And so this was really cool because we were able to watch our summer interns go from getting that initial access and then pivoting using that vulnerability. And this was a huge win for Blue because again we were able to contribute back to the vendor, and it gave a really cool project for our interns to go home with. We still talk to a lot of our interns, and they had classmates that went to Google or Amazon or Microsoft, and a lot of them were really stonewalled in what they could and couldn't do. So it really allowed us to use our interns properly, and they had a ton of fun, and that's why we have such a high return rate for making them employees. All right, so smash and grab. Robert really enjoyed Hollywood. This was it for me. So if any of you guys went to Derby last year, there was a talk by Mick Douglas, Rapid Incident Response with PowerShell, and then Detect Me If You Can by Ben 10. So after that, we came back and said, you know what, we've got a lot of detections, but you know what, screw all the detections. Let's just throw 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 emails at all these different users. with different pretexts, with different malware written in different languages that are some in memory, some on disk. Let's do tons of network enumeration, user enumeration system, and then let's just start mass exfils. You wrote yours in Go, right?
Yeah, Go.
Yeah, so.
Undetectable.
Yeah, so if you write in Go and then, submit it to VirusTotal, you're gonna get 0 out of 64. So with all of that, we really wanted to also see how well our blue team and incident responders would react to such a massive exfil. On top of that, seeing if they can really discover the full scope. We had a lot of automation built into it, and it was awesome. On the blue side, this was a huge learning point for them. A lot of times, the red team, even our third-party pen tests, we're a little bit more surgical and tactical on where we go and that lateral movement. This was the total opposite of that. At one point, I'm not lying, one of our incident responders came up to us and said, "Can you please just make it stop?" Yeah. So as a result, we had to rebuild a lot of our incident playbooks. We needed a quick and easy way to stop that bleeding and stop it quickly. We also needed that non-emotional way of, should we block or should we watch and monitor and see, what else is going on. And the really cool thing that came from it was a lot more time was pushed towards mitigations and protections versus detections. The last one, remote access piggybacking. This was a fun project because it allowed us to piggyback on our graphical remote connection tool. So by compromising an off-network system, or BYOD, we were able to then piggyback on Citrix and then get into the domain and then continue our shenanigans from there. So on the blue side, this really allowed Blue's initial concerns with the product and the way that it was getting set up. We also expanded even more so our MFA rollout, our log rollout, and then continued to tighten those security policies on those BYOD devices. All right. So 2017 was an incredible year for us as red teamers. I mean, we had a friggin' blast. But more importantly, from the blue team and security side of USA was way better. We had a couple of third-party pen test companies during 2017 trying, we have what we call our zero notice. These are, we pay you a bunch of money, don't tell us anything, just try and get access. Be the bad guy, do all the recon, do whatever, however you do it, just get in. And during 2017, we had quite a few third-party pen test companies attempt to gain that access, get that foothold, lateral movement, get the crown jewels. And none of them were able to establish a access for more than, I think it was 10 minutes. So because of this, one company in particular mailed in a pump plug and had a trusted advisor plug it into one of our 20 to 50 LAN ports that weren't 802.1x enabled. So they attempted exfil through the pump plug, through web, and were blocked. So then they flipped the switch to 3G exfil, and of course they got 3G exfil and C2. So if anybody here knows how to block 3G legally, I'd appreciate it. So because of the successes and the trust and confidence that we had built with our managers, with all the other teams in IT and the developers, more importantly with our C-suite, we now have the back end to start making red team positions full-time.
All right, so the future, or really it's present day since it's 2018, right? So in November, management gave me the approval to go full-time red team. So 4 years in, finally get the first full red team member, right? So it's ended up being about a 6 to 9 month transition, like David's been talking about. Roughly half the detections he built and roughly half of them I built on our blue team times. So all of those detections I've built, I'm working to get them transitioned off to someone else. In addition, I have over 24 detections that I'm in the middle of developing. Again, as I mentioned before, some detections we knock out in a week or two, some detections it takes 6 to 9 months, right? So, me getting all of that transition, all that blue team work transition off my plate has ended up taking some time. As far as task goes, there's really nothing new that Red Team's going to be doing. It just formalizes some of the things that we were doing on a more ad hoc basis before. All right, so yeah, Red Team is still very much involved in doing blue team work though. Just to give you an idea, and as David already mentioned, he's still part-time blue team, and when he's blue team, he is over the new detection effort. And I, even though I'm full-time Red Team, or will be within just next few weeks or month hopefully, I'll still be doing product evaluations, building proof of concepts for like the latest named threat that comes out, right? Or proof of concepts for to help prioritize detection efforts, right? So both of us are still directly helping make blue stronger, even though we're red. All right, so your turn. Let's build your red team. Some important things we want to leave with you guys that we want you to remember. Red team is a prime bad guy target as well, right? Because why hack the corporation when you just have to hack red team who's hacking the corporation, right? So use things like FDE or full disk encryption in your attacker VMs in case those get stolen or compromised. In fact, encryption in general, right? So for your command and control, your exfil, your storage, and your VMs like we just talked about, use encryption everywhere. Just to give you an idea of what we do, on our C2, when we establish C2 during an op, that is encrypted when it leaves the victim, and it's not decrypted until it hits our attacker VM, like at home or whatever. So even though we're utilizing third-party server providers like AWS or Azure or Rackspace or whatever, if those nodes were to get compromised during an op, it doesn't actually affect our op. It certainly doesn't affect the data integrity, right? MFA, yeah, so third-party accounts, right? So a lot of red teams will use like Google, Slack, GitLab, what have you. Make sure all of those security knobs are turned up to the max on those accounts and make sure they don't get compromised. Specifically, make sure you have MFA on all of your accounts. It's kind of a table stakes, right? Social media. This one gets me, right? Sometimes I see red teamers, and I guess I don't know for sure, but I speculate that some red teamers, when they find something cool, they immediately go to Twitter and start blabbing about it, right? So just remember this, when your blue team is made weaker, you fell as a red team, right? So don't start talking about things from a red team perspective until you know that your blue team is protected against it. Red team's sole job is to make blue team stronger. Okay, very important concept here. All right, so time box IREs, or again, incident response exercises. What we found is that after about, 6-8 hours, sometimes 10 hours, our blue team completely they start hating us after about 8 hours or so. They're not learning much anymore. We've had IREs the last 3 days before, and they just completely resent us by the end of that. So you don't want to work, you want them to work hard enough and long enough to learn the concepts of incident response, but you don't want them to just completely get pissed off at you, right, and stop learning. To help with this, give hints along the way. I mentioned it before, red team sits with blue team during IREs. Don't give all the hints right up front, let them work on it for an hour, 2 hours, whatever that looks like, and give them no hints, and then start dropping hints at the 2-hour mark, drop even more hints at 3 hours and so on, so that by the end it can be wrapped up in, let's say 8 hours or whatever that looks like for your blue team. You're never gonna find that perfect balance. You're just gonna have to continually try to tweak that balance and how many hints and tips you give along the way based on your feedback during your AARs from your incident response exercises. All right, so final thoughts. So again, not gonna happen overnight. Like we already mentioned, it took us 2 years to even get to full-blown red team operations and 4 years to get one full red team member. So when you're building your red team, it's probably not gonna happen overnight. Trust. This is something we've talked about multiple times as well during this presentation. You're not gonna be trusted with much in the beginning, but be counted on to be trusted with that, and you'll gain more trust along the way, right? Do things different every time. Don't always throw a phishing and get the same rat on the same box and pivot the same way every time, right? Completely break that mold when the op is over, and remake a new mold for your next op based on blue team feedback and based on what's going on in the industry, right? All right, so it's actually on here so you can cheat, but maybe close your eyes, don't look. What's red team's purpose, right? Someone tell me what red team's purpose is.
Make blue team stronger.
Make blue team, thank you very much. That's right, that's right. So listen, guys, seriously, if you remember nothing else from our talk here, remember this line. Red team's purpose is to make blue team stronger. Seriously, please remember that. All right, that's it, guys. So a few special things. I think we still have a couple of minutes. Obviously, we want to thank our families. For those that have families, you know what it's like when you're doing something like this that's very intense in the number of hours that you're putting in. Sometimes family time gets put on the side burner, unfortunately. And specifically, thank my son. He's here helping us today run a camera and do handouts, and our timekeeper. So thank you for being here, buddy. Third con. So this is his third HackerCon to be at. And yesterday, I think you hacked more locks at Lockpicking Village than anyone else, right? I think you got the record. Yeah, exactly. Also, current and former Red Team members. This huge shout out. Specifically, David, who's here with me, right? So, had it not been for David, we wouldn't even be here presenting today. David's the one that found out about this and got us signed up in the whole 9 yards. I mean, I put pretty much all this content together, but just had it on a page or whatever, very boring. I mean, had it not been for David, we'd be presenting like in Gedit or VM or VI or something, right? Seriously, it would not be this pretty. David built all of this for us. And management. Again, I mentioned earlier, management can make or break things, and we have the best manager I've ever worked under. We're working under right now. Awesome manager.
All right, so a couple more thank yous real quick. One more at USA, we've got Bill Wright, who's our senior advisor. He has been incredible with ideas and all that other fun stuff and getting things pushed and being our top cover. It's a good day when you get 3 NSA guys in a room with the door closed planning all sorts of shenanigans. So really want to thank Bill. At Hack West, honestly, thank you so much for trusting 2 new guys and allowing us to share our story. And to you guys, thank you very much. We thought we were going to get maybe 3, 4, 5 people in here, including the 3 of us. But we really appreciate you guys being here. All right, so one more thing. Check out Robert's blog at penconsultants.com. He's got a lot of really cool work that he's done on the outside, as well as a lot of stuff that we've done together at USA that we've gotten the permission to post there, both from USA and the third-party company. Again, thank you guys, everybody, for being here. We really appreciate it, and have a great rest of your trip. If you have any other questions later on, hit us up on Twitter, and have a safe flight.